My name is Natalie Quinn, and 3 months ago, I buried my mother. She was the last person who truly saw me. While others in the family were off chasing stock options and vacation homes, I was the one who stayed behind, running the books for our family's century-old bakery business and making sure Mom had her meds on time, her favorite tea steeped at exactly 4 minutes, and her pain hidden from the world. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because I loved her, because that's what family is supposed to mean. So when she died, something inside me fractured. I took 2 weeks off to grieve, not just for her, but for the version of life I thought I had. One where love meant loyalty and sacrifice was honored. But then I came back, and my name was gone. Off the signage, off the website, off the tax filings, and worst of all, off the ownership papers. Quinn and Daughters, the bakery she built from scratch and promised would be mine, had been quietly renamed Quinn Artisan Foods. A corporate restructuring, my cousin Rachel called it. My Uncle Tom, Mom's brother, shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. "You needed time," he said flatly. "We needed leadership." I stared at the blank space on the office door where my name used to be and realized something deeper than betrayal had happened. This wasn't just about grief. This was about greed. They waited until I was at my weakest, until I was curled in bed, sifting through condolence cards, and they struck, quietly, legally, without shame. And when I tried to speak up, they called me emotional, said maybe the stress had clouded my judgment. But I see clearly now. They thought I was broken. They thought I was too sad, too soft, too small to fight back. But they forgot who taught me how to bake from nothing, who raised me in a kitchen of survival and sacrifice. They may have taken my name off the building, but I was about to burn the whole thing down, one recipe at a time. My childhood smelled like cinnamon and yeast. Some kids grew up on cartoons and cereal. I grew up on early morning dough prep and the hiss of steam rising from ovens. The bakery, Quinn and Daughters, was my mother's life, and by extension, it became mine. It started as a small corner shop in a sleepy Pennsylvania town. My grandfather opened it after returning from the war, and when he passed, my mother took over. Everyone assumed my Uncle Tom, the business-minded one, would run it, but he left to chase real estate and bigger fish. My mother stayed. She modernized, expanded, and turned Quinn and Daughters into a beloved staple. And she brought me with her. By the time I was 10, I could fold croissant dough in my sleep. At 15, I handled morning inventory. At 19, I left college early. Not because I wasn't doing well, but because Mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer. That's when I came home for good. No one else did. My Uncle Tom sent flowers. My cousin Rachel flew in for a week, posed for Instagram stories, and left before the first chemo treatment started. I stayed. I learned how to manage the books. I ran supplier relationships. I balanced food costs, oversaw seasonal menus, kept the brand relevant online. I baked, yes, but I also made sure the bakery didn't fall apart behind the scenes. I became, in every sense, my mother's partner, but she always reminded me, "This place is yours, Nat, not just in spirit, in writing." She said it often, especially toward the end. I remember sitting with her by the window one night while she held my hand, her fingers frail but insistent. "When I'm gone, don't let them change it. Don't let them push you out. This business is yours." I believed her, because she wasn't just my mom. She was the boss, the one who built the business, the one who made sure I knew everything from profit margins to the secret behind our sourdough starter. She told me the will had been updated, that I'd get her shares, that I'd have control. But after the funeral, everything became hazy. Tom and Rachel were suddenly everywhere, managing transitions, as they put it. They offered to handle vendors while I took time. I didn't argue. I was too raw, too numb. And then they took it. The rebranding, the legal restructuring, the revision of ownership documents, all of it done quietly through a back-channel LLC Tom had created a year ago, one I later discovered had no mention of me, the bakery my mother spent 40 years building, the one I'd poured my entire adult life into, gone from under me, all because I dared to grieve. I confronted Tom the day I found out. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "You're not the only one with a legacy to protect," he said. "This business is a family asset, not a personal diary." A personal diary. That's what he called my mother's life's work. Rachel was even worse. She leaned against the espresso counter I helped install 2 years ago and said, "Look, we know this is hard, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise. You were drowning in this place. We're giving it structure." Structure? They didn't just erase me. They tried to rewrite the entire story. They used my mother's death as a smokescreen, took the only thing I had left of her and treated it like a brand acquisition. But here's the thing they forgot. I know this business better than anyone. Not because I studied it, but because I lived it. I remember the early mornings, the broken ovens, the flour-covered ledgers, and the way Mom would hum when a batch of brioche turned out just right. And I wasn't going to let her memory be reduced to a slogan in a glossy rebrand. I'd lost my mother, but I hadn't lost my fight. Not yet. For weeks, I tried to reason with them. I asked for meetings, tried to discuss my mother's intentions, even offered to compromise, splitting ownership, restructuring roles, anything that would at least keep me connected to the place I'd given my life to. Every time I was met with stone-faced dismissal. Rachel claimed she was too busy streamlining operations to talk. Tom kept sending boilerplate legal responses through a lawyer I didn't even know we had on retainer. I began digging. My mother's will, the one she told me was updated in my favor, was nowhere to be found. Tom claimed she never signed a new version, that the old one left all decisions to him, the eldest sibling. I knew that wasn't true, but proving it was a different matter. The lawyer who handled the estate suddenly couldn't find the revised documents. Everything had been scrubbed. I was being erased not just from the business, but from the legacy. And while they steamrolled forward with corporate buzzwords and bland press releases, I watched loyal employees squirm under the new structure. Wendy, the head baker who'd worked there for 20 years, quietly told me she'd been asked to stop using my mom's original recipes, replaced with faster alternatives. Arturo, our longtime delivery driver, mentioned being told not to engage if I came by the building again. The message was clear. I was no longer welcome. They didn't just want control. They wanted the narrative. They wanted to pretend I was never part of it. The turning point came when I stopped by the shop one early morning, hoping to speak to one of the remaining original staff. The door was locked, new security system, keypads replaced, cameras installed. I stood outside, looking in at the shelves I once stocked, the kitchen I once cleaned at midnight, the cash register that still had my handwriting taped inside with notes on handling coupons. And I saw Rachel behind the counter, laughing with a marketing rep. She made eye contact with me for 2 seconds, then turned away, like I was a stranger. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by flour-dusted notebooks, photos of me and my mom in the bakery, and the original recipes she'd handwritten over decades. And I realized something important. They could take the sign off the building, they could take my name off the paperwork, but they couldn't take what I knew. They didn't have the soul of the business. I did. I still had the starter cultures, the recipe books, the vendor relationships, the stories, the loyal customers who knew my mom's face and trusted my hands. They tried to erase me, but I wasn't just part of the legacy. I was the legacy, and it was time they remembered exactly what that meant. I didn't want to destroy the bakery. I wanted to reclaim its soul, so I stopped begging for a seat at a table I built. I started building my own. It began with the recipes. I had all of them, handwritten by my mother, annotated by me. Things Tom and Rachel couldn't replicate no matter how many consultants they hired. I pulled the ones that mattered most, the honey sage scones that sold out every fall, the rosemary lemon bread that made the local newspaper, the almond croissants that tourists used to line up for, and I went back into the kitchen. Not theirs. Mine. I rented a small commercial space on the outskirts of town, a former flower shop with faded pink walls and cracked tile. I scrubbed every surface, painted it fresh, and brought in one battered industrial oven I found on Craigslist. It wasn't pretty, but it smelled like home. I launched under a new name, NQ Breadworks. I didn't hide who I was. Quinn was still in the name, but this time it was mine alone. I didn't do press. I didn't run ads. Instead, I did what my mom taught me. I baked with care, and I served people with heart. The first weekend, I sold out of everything by 11 a.m. The second weekend, there was a line out the door. By the third, local food bloggers had found me. One posted a side-by-side comparison of my croissant versus the mass-produced mess at the newly branded Quinn Artisan Foods. The comments were brutal and honest. This is what real grief and love tastes like. The original Quinn legacy lives here. Rachel's version is just corporate cosplay. Tom tried to intimidate me, of course. I got a cease and desist letter about confusing branding and unauthorized recipe use. My lawyer, an old friend of my mom's, fired back with a scanned copy of the original recipe notebook, dated, signed, and notarized. I had proof. I had history. More importantly, I had people. My regulars returned. Former employees dropped by to offer help. Even Wendy and Arturo left Quinn Artisan Foods to work part-time shifts at my tiny shop. The final blow came when the local business journal did a feature story titled, "The Daughter They Tried to Erase: How Natalie Quinn Reclaimed a Legacy with Flour and Fire." They ran it on the front page, with a photo of me in the window of my new shop, holding a loaf of sourdough with my mother's signature scorched into the crust. And just like that, they couldn't control the story anymore. They had money, lawyers, and branding. But I had memory, meaning, and momentum. I didn't want revenge in the form of destruction. I wanted truth to rise, like a perfect loaf. And it did. It happened on a Saturday morning, 6 weeks after I opened NQ Breadworks. I was prepping for the weekend rush, flour dust clinging to my forearms, when Arturo stuck his head into the kitchen and said, "You might want to come outside." I wiped my hands, expecting a delivery. Instead, I saw Rachel standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, sunglasses on, tension radiating off her like heat from summer asphalt. She was flanked by a man in a navy suit, probably one of their lawyers. I stepped out slowly, apron still on, the smell of fresh sourdough following me like a banner of defiance. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. I gave a short laugh. "Now you want to talk? We've been more than patient, Natalie," she said, clearly trying to keep her voice level. "This imitation of yours is hurting the brand. You're siphoning our customers, our employees, our legacy," I corrected. "You mean I'm reclaiming it?" Her jaw clenched. "This isn't about you. This is about protecting the Quinn name." I took a slow step forward. It's about how you tried to erase me when I was grieving. You thought you could do it quietly, legally, and I wouldn't fight back." The lawyer cut in. If this continues, we'll be forced to file for damages. There's IP at stake, not to mention confusion in the market. I reached into my apron and handed him a small folder. Inside was a copy of the original business license my mother filed 22 years ago, handwritten recipe notes with both our initials, and most importantly, a letter, one I hadn't shown anyone yet. It was from my mother. She'd written it 6 months before she passed and asked a close friend, who was also her old attorney, to hold on to it. It was addressed to whom it may concern, and in it she explicitly stated her intention for me to inherit full operational control and creative rights to all original recipes, names, and product lines under Quinn and Daughters. Her signature, witnessed, dated, filed. Their lawyer paled a little. Rachel didn't speak. She just stood there, blinking like the sunlight had suddenly turned hostile. "You tried to gut what we built and repackage it like a startup," I said quietly. "But people remember what real tastes like, and they're choosing me." She stepped back, flustered, trying to regain composure. "So, what now? You think you've won?" I shook my head. "This isn't about winning. This is about making sure no one else erases a woman's legacy while she's still warm in the ground." I turned and walked back inside. Behind me, the Saturday crowd had started to gather. Regulars, neighbors, former customers of Quinn and Daughters who now lined up for NQ Breadworks, where the story and the soul still lived. Rachel didn't follow. She couldn't, because for the first time, everyone could see who the real Quinn daughter was, and she wasn't standing behind a corporate banner. She was behind the counter, covered in flour, heart on her sleeve, rolling out the next batch of truth by hand. After that morning, I never saw Rachel in front of my shop again. There was no formal apology, no press release correcting the lie, but the silence from their side said enough. Their lawyer didn't follow up. The threats stopped, and gradually their version of the story began to crumble, not because I forced it, but because it simply couldn't stand anymore. The community made their choice. Customers left Quinn Artisan Foods in waves. It didn't happen overnight, but the shift was undeniable. People who'd grown up with the original Quinn and Daughters taste could tell the difference. The new place had all the branding, but none of the warmth, none of the soul. Reviews turned cold. Employees left. Even some vendors quietly moved their contracts over to me, and I kept going, one day at a time. I expanded hours, trained 2 new bakers, added a Sunday brunch menu using Mom's old holiday specials. I framed her handwritten bread pudding recipe near the register. Her flour-smudged notes and tiny heart in the margin now watched over every sale. What once felt like a broken chapter slowly became a new beginning. Then, one afternoon, a woman came into the shop, older, neat hair, soft eyes. She said her name was Linda, that she used to bake with my mother during the early days when they rented kitchen space before dawn. She had been away for years, but she'd heard about everything. She took one bite of the sourdough and started crying. "She'd be proud of you," she whispered. And for the first time since Mom died, I didn't feel that ache in my chest. I felt something warmer, not relief, not vindication, peace. I'd spent so long fighting to hold on to something, my mother's memory, her business, my identity, that I hadn't realized I'd already carried the most important part with me all along. Her lessons, her grit, her quiet refusal to quit, even when no one else believed in her. Tom eventually sold his stake in Quinn Artisan Foods and retired. Rachel moved back to the city, pivoted into marketing consulting, and pretended like none of it had happened. That was fine. I didn't need their acknowledgement. They had their ending, and I had mine. Only mine wasn't the end. It was just the moment I stopped surviving and finally started living. Some mornings, I still wake up before dawn, long before the city stirs. The habit is too ingrained, too sacred to break. I pull on my apron, tie my hair back, and step into the quiet of the kitchen. The stainless steel counters shimmer faintly in the low light. The smell of proofing dough fills the room like memory. That's when I feel her most. Not in the framed photos, not in the faded newspaper clippings, but in the silence before the oven's roar, in the weight of a mixing bowl, in the first bite of a croissant still warm from the tray. Grief is strange. It doesn't leave. It just changes. At first it was a knife, then a shadow. Now it's more like a song I don't hear until I'm alone. And in that space, I talk to her. I tell her about the customers who bring their kids and say, "My mom brought me here when I was their age." I tell her about how Arturo dances when he loads deliveries now, how Wendy sings again while shaping loaves, just like she used to, how her lemon poppy seed cake is still the most requested item on the menu. I tell her that I didn't let them erase us, that I built something real, something ours, and I think, if she were still here, she wouldn't need to say anything. She'd just nod, wipe her hands on her apron, and tell me to turn the oven down 5 degrees. I don't need revenge anymore. I don't need to see Tom feel guilt or Rachel admit she was wrong. I have this. A business not built on greed or image or control, but on care. And the little girl who once sat on a flour sack in the corner of the kitchen, watching her mother fold dough like magic, she's still here, only now she's grown, she's stronger, and she knows no one can take your name off something you embody. The sign above the door reads, NQ Breadworks, a legacy handcrafted. And beneath it, etched into the wood just below eye level, are 5 words my mother once whispered in the quiet of a long bake: "We rise, even when broken." And now, I believe her every single morning.